What's going on, guys? Welcome back. First off, I just want to say I apologize about kind of like the lack of uploads and stuff lately. As usual, just been super busy, but also just kind of finding myself with a lack of motivation right now. You know, just between the move, everything changing up in the business, things like that. You know, whatever other things I got going on, I just been kind of, I don't know. Been kind of in and out of being sick as well. But, you know, as they say, if you can't be motivated, just be consistent. So we're back at work. We're going to do some work today. We're back on the 6.0 project. We're going to go through and rebuild this transmission. I already got it torn down. As you guys can see, got the case cleaned up, got it painted, looking nice, matched the desert tan that we did on the motor. But yeah, we got to get the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get all these parts put in the parts washer. And guys, let me tell you, like I said, I already got it all torn down. Let me tell you guys, the best investment I think for this shop that I've made is this parts cleaner that I built, this little Christmas tree thing to hold all these parts. Excuse the noise, we got Trevor over here working on a 6.0. But yeah, guys, if you don't have one of those coolers, I implore you to get one. They are literally the best investment. I think I paid 800 bucks for that thing off Facebook Marketplace like 4 years ago. So anyways, guys, first things first, we're gonna get all this in the parts washer, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the parts we're gonna use, and we'll get started. So as you guys can see, this parts washer with this tree, I got everything to fit in here. So we'll just throw it in here for about 30 minutes to an hour, and these parts will pretty much come out looking brand new. So again, great investment, probably one of the best tools that I have purchased for the shop. Just that easy, and walk away. All right, guys, got a little bit of liquid motivation here in a can. Anyway, so here's the parts we're going to be working with on this transmission build. First off, if you guys remember, we did a transmission build before, a 5R110 on the channel. This one's a little different because instead of using on that one, it was more of a performance build. So we did like GPZ clutches, billet input shaft, billet triple disc converter, the whole nine. This one, we're going for just more of a tow rig, nothing too crazy. So what we have here is a OEM clutch kit, Exedi clutch kit. All the steels really looked phenomenal on this transmission. So what we're gonna do is just kind of scuff them up, clean them back up, reuse them, save a few dollars there. But I did go ahead and purchase some GPZs for the directs, which are the clutches that are on in, I believe 3rd and 5th. I'll double check that. I may be thinking of Allison, but I'll double check that, and I'll let you guys know. But anyway, those clutches, the directs, if you guys know anything about Fords and 5R110s, these are the most worn clutches. These are the ones that wear out the most. They're the hardest used ones in the transmission, arguably. So spent a couple extra dollars and got the GPZs for that. But anyway, like I said, the teardown, all the clutches that were in here actually didn't look half bad. So this trans was living a pretty healthy life. So I'm not worried about the OEM rebuild. But we are going to do some upgrades as far as the pump. I went ahead and got the Superior, both the Superior kits for the 5R110. This one here is the pressure upgrade and the lube modifications that you want to do for these transmissions. We'll go over those as we get into them. This kit here comes with some upgrades. Comes with a shim in here for tightening up the end play. Comes with a new direct bushing, an upgraded low reverse snap ring, and I forget what this snap ring is, some of this other stuff. Again, we'll get into it as we tear into it. Superior makes some phenomenal, there we go. Superior makes a very well put together instruction sheet on their stuff, which is really nice. With a lot of things nowadays, nobody wants to put instructions on anything anymore. But then, of course, we got a new set of pistons, bonded pistons. Now, these are the performance ones. They weren't a huge upgrade in cost. I think it was like 10-20 bucks more from just the regular OEM ones. So I went ahead and got them anyway. These are the same ones that we used on Gabriel's 5R, so I got no problem with them. I'm gonna go ahead and use them again. And then over here we got the torque converter. My buddy Jesus over at TCR here in Vegas went ahead and rebuilt it. Stock cover, no billet cover, nothing like that. Again, because this transmission is going behind this truck, that stock turbo, stock injectors, no tune. I intend this thing to just be like a good towing vehicle. You know, we're not going for a race truck. We got plenty of those. You know, so the next owner, if they want to do whatever, that's on them, but at least we have a good foundation to start with. And of course too, we have a full seal and gasket kit. Just a, what is it, TranStar, I believe. Of course, we're going to replace all the gaskets in here, and we're going to go ahead. I got the valve body, which is actually out of Gabriel's transmission, that we got to get cleaned up and reused for this. So, and guys, real quick, I apologize if the lighting's kind of weird. I haven't had time to fully set up my room here. I only got the one light here, and we got the lights here, but I do need to add, like, I think what I'll do is get a couple more of these, add like 2-3 of them along here, maybe one here. You guys can see I started setting up some of my room. I got my pegboard. I just basically did some self tappers on the back of the shelves here that divide my room and the parts room. So slowly but surely we're getting everything kind of together. You know, it just moving a whole business like this and a whole shop, especially on such short notice, takes time. So anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and just waiting on the parts to clean up. I'm gonna clean up a couple of these parts here, like I said, the steels and stuff, and we'll come back once we're going into assembly. Now, when you're checking your steels to see if they're reusable, there's a couple things you're looking for. Main thing is you're looking to make sure that it's straight, right? I know it's kind of hard to see, but when you get a lot of heat put into them, they can kind of distort, and they'll get wavy. They'll actually look like the this one here, which is supposed to look like this, but your steels are not supposed to look like that. So you're looking for that. You also want to make sure that your steels are flat all around, meaning like in the center here. Sometimes with the way the piston is, it'll push and you'll get like a cone effect going on with your steels and clutches. So you want to make sure that they're perfectly flat. That's the main thing with that. And then as far as cleaning them up, all I'm using is a Scotch-Brite pad, and you guys can kind of see how this one is like shiny, and then this one I just kind of scuffed up and dulled it out a little bit. We're not trying to take off material, we're not doing any crazy machining, just kind of break down this shiny surface so that way the new clutches have a bit of a rougher surface to bite on, you know, as where are we at, you know, something like this where you guys can see it's just kind of more of a rougher machine finish instead of almost a polish finished after, you know, 200-something thousand miles of use. But that's what I'm doing here, guys. That's a super simple thing. Good way to cut down costs on a budget build such as this one. All right, so while we wait on the rest of the parts to clean up, we're going to get the low reverse piston out. It is actually inside the transmission case. It is not, it's the only one. And to do that, we are gonna use our trusty $30 Amazon special piston chingadera, whatever you wanna call it. And sorry about that noise, guys. And basically what we're gonna do is you got these, all right, let's not drop the phone. Basically you got these arms. Of course, it's always weird doing stuff one-handed. Sorry, guys. Come on. Woo! Get it. Right. And what's cool about this tool versus the floor press is obviously I can't get the floor press or the transmission on there to make that happen. So this little tool just shoved down there. And on the other side, we got this piece that'll go here, right? Tighten it down and then push down on the spring like a regular press. Get the snap ring out, pull it out. And then of course we have the new one that we're gonna slam in. Yes, sir. Huh? The low reverse piston. All right, you guys seen, needed a little help, had to switch up the tools a little bit, but we got her done. Focus up. So, typical spring, and then I'm gonna come out. Gotta get some pliers. Cool. Now out with the old, in with the new. So we're gonna go ahead, clean up down in there, just wipe it all, make it nice and clean, put some goop on, goop it up, and do the opposite of taking it out, putting it back in. Again, guys, much easier if you have the actual stand to hold the transmission vertical and whatnot, but hey, we're just getting her done anyway. So we got everything out, washed up, all the drums, everything like that. Now this is what I normally do before cleaning everything up, but figured it'd just be easier to do it now to show you guys. But what you want to do is there's a few things you're going to check on the hard parts. Generally, the hard parts are going to be fine, but obviously, you know, if you have a failure, you want to look around, find out where you had the failure. Now, on the 5R110s especially, one of the major issues they have is there's not enough grounding from the transmission to like the battery, and what'll happen is it's basically trying to find ground, and apparently the way it finds ground, especially on these, is through the pump gears. And what'll happen is the pump gears will actually weld to this the stator plate here. So you want to look, this is where the pump gears ride. Look for any sort of wear on this. See how there, you can see where it's wearing, but it's nothing that's catching your fingertips, right? You know, so that's good to go. Same thing, you just want to look around here, but mainly you want to look in here, and you can see there's just a little, again, a little bit of scuffing, but nothing that's catching your finger, nothing crazy. So that pump cavity is good to go. Check the pump gears out too. They're still in the wash. I dropped them, so I gotta wash them again. And then on the 5R110s especially, like any transmission, you want to check your stator bushing here and make sure there's no major wear. You're looking, there's a little bit of a dark spot here, but you don't want to see any huge dark spots, especially on a the stator bushing. This is where the converter rides. So basically the converter goes in like this, and this is where this rides. So one issue you can have is a out of whack converter, right? Maybe a poorly built converter, or you could have a failed flex plate, something like that. Basically something that could put a excessive side load or stress on this bushing and wear it out. Sometimes you'll see like it'll actually push it out and, you know, pancake it a bit. Now, the issue on the 5R110s is that this bushing is not serviceable, at least without some special tooling. Basically, this bushing, it's kind of hard to see, but it's not, basically they press it in and then they finish hone it, because this hole, I guess, is not perfectly centered. You know, I don't know, Ford, the way they do things is weird, but basically if this bushing's bad, you're just gonna wanna go ahead and replace this whole stator housing, basically. You can't just service the bushing like you can on like a 48, a 68, whatever else, you know, like a normal transmission. But anyway, guys, also on this transmission, like any transmission, you want to check all your bushings. All your drums are going to have bushings. Now on this unit, again, because we're on a little bit of a budget, I chose not to replace all the bushings. So the only bushing we are replacing for sure is the direct bushing. This is the direct drum, and that's going to be with this superior one-piece bushing with the special coating and all that, yada yada. We'll get to that here in a minute. But otherwise, all the bushings are fine. And again, it's the same thing as that bushing. You're just looking for any sort of like pancaking, any sort of scratches or gouges, things like that. Moving on, your gears, you're gonna look for any sort of major pitting. See how there's a little bit of light pitting there, but nothing super crazy. You don't want to see any pitting like down in the valley there. And just make sure it spins freely. Kind of check your end play here. If you look in the ATSG book, which you better have if you're going to be building transmissions, and each book is specific to each transmission, but if you guys look, there's going to be a spec for how much end play should be in all these gears, so you want to check that out. Again, guys, I already went through this. You know, this one, you know, not looking the best in the West, right? You can see a little bit of pitting on some of these gears, just starting basically. But being that this one is a stock power unit, I'm not too worried. If we were building like a big horsepower unit, maybe we would replace those gears or use them, you know, swap them out for a unit like this. But otherwise, you know, I'm not too worried. So again, guys, you're just kind of looking at things like that. Same thing on these gears. Look for any sort of obviously bent gears, chip gears, things like that, but pitting's going to be more likely. And then your play, you know, because the bearings in here are non-serviceable. So anyway, like I said, we went through that already. Now I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with the pump. We'll get the pump put together and get it off to the side, just because there's a whole bunch of pieces that we can put together and get it out of the way. All right, so the Superior pump kit covers a few major things. One of the biggest things for me, at least, and especially anybody if you're running these transmissions in a hotter climate, is the full-time cooler flow modification. Basically, these pumps stock, they don't let fluid out into the cooler until a certain temperature. And here, when it's hot, when you're running these in a hot temperature, you're running them towing. You know, Vegas, it gets up to 115 degrees in the summertime. We don't want that. So one thing we're doing is we're replacing the OEM setup, where basically this is a thermostat kind of deal, from what I understand. Replacing that with just their pieces here. You guys can see we're gonna get rid of all this crap and put their crap in. But yeah, that's one of the major things that we're doing. Other than that, you can see here, this is the new pressure regulating valve. Here's the old one. One of the issues that they have, I guess, is common in here. These like to seize up and stick. You'll get variable pressures where you have too high a pressure, too low a pressure, things like that. Not good. This one, you can see, is kind of got like a ribbing going, and of course it's got like a special polish kind of deal that they say are coating, and it's like super machine fit. But these ribs, basically, even if some trash gets in here, the idea is that it'll kind of go into the valleys and still allow this valve to move around, because you don't want to have too high of a pressure when you don't want it, and vice versa, too low. Other than that, it's going to modify some of your converter lockup deal. Come on. Basically just upping the pressures for the converter, changing when it locks up, things like that. But anyway, this is all the old stuff I got laid out, and we're gonna replace some of it with the new stuff that comes in here. So one of the first things we're gonna do, super easy, is in the lockup control, we're gonna just replace basically the green spring here with their new yellow spring. So we get rid of that, put that there. One thing to note is this valve, or this plug, whatever you wanna call it, at the end, has this little valve in it, a little, whatever it's called. It goes in here. Come on, focus up. Make sure that stays in there. Easy to lose. I almost just dropped it and lost it myself. Now moving on, we'll go ahead and start with the flow control setup. And as I was saying, this whole deal here, basically they're saying you're gonna get rid of all the spring, the valve, and this little thermosistor thing. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's put that over there for now. And we're gonna replace it with the brown spring, the limit valve, and the blocker valve here, which is basically this deal here. This is gonna go, again guys, the instructions are phenomenal, just kind of follow them, super easy. Match up orientation, put that there. Then we're gonna look for the brown spring. That looks pretty brown to me. And that fits nicely in there. Come on, focus up. Get your life together. Cool. That's done. Now we can play around with the converter valve. Now you can see here, there's actually 3 different springs that come in this kit for the converter valve. We got a white, orange, and black, which it looks like it's gonna be this one, and this one. And what they want you to do is measure this part, and there's 3 different sizes: 402 thou, 312 thou, and 297. So get your handy dandy measuring device. Come on, can I do this? So we got the 297 thou, which means we're gonna use the black spring. So we're gonna use this one here. All right, we'll put that. And now that's done. Anti-drain back, basically leave that alone. That stays the same. Now we'll move on to the pressure regulating. This one, again, pretty easy. We're gonna replace the spring with the red one that comes in the kit, which definitely that one. We can go ahead and ditch this whole deal here. That'll go there. And then obviously, pretty simple, the ribbed end. See, there's 2 ends, there's a smooth and the ribbed. Ribbed is gonna go into the stator for its pleasure. And then only other thing we got to do is there's a drill bit. We're going to go ahead and drill out the little lube orifice here. Where can you see it? So pretty simple, little drill, little hole, make hole larger, boom, that's done. So I'll do that off camera here in a minute. And then moving on, we have the little plugs that we're going to replace here. So some stators they're actually different stators. It's different, especially for different years. I think it shows it in the other sheet, but this one we're gonna go ahead and follow the instructions because we have this hole here and we have this little ball and seat deal here. Basically the whole idea here is to open this up, clean it out, make sure there's no trash in there, and replace it with the new stuff. And then this hole here we're gonna go ahead and block off with this plug. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that knocked out and come back here shortly. We got the pump case put together, the pump half, stator housing, whatever you wanna call it, all put together with all the new Superior upgrades. We got our EPC plug here. We got the other plug they provide here. And then of course all the new valves, new springs, Now, time to assemble. One thing to note with the gears, you got the pump gears here. See how there's a flat side, and then there's this side with the bevel, and then the beveled pump gear for the that goes onto the converter. You want to make sure that's facing out on the pump. That way when you go to slip the converter in, you're gonna have a bad time if you're trying to do it here. This way, this will kind of guide the converter in. And then of course you got a dot here and then a dot on this side. So just kind of keep those two together. We'll put them together like this, and then they'll go in dot facing up. Obviously what we're gonna do is we're gonna lube this up with some green trans gel. That way when it fires up, it is ready to go. We'll put some lube on the bushing too. Here is where you're gonna need a special tool. So it's this tool here, a pump alignment tool from Transgo. And I believe it comes with this. Either that or you need this. It's a pump tool. You guys will see how it goes together once we get into it. But right now, real quick, I'm just gonna go ahead and lube up these gears, get them stuffed in here. Again, the reason why you lube them up is you just don't want them, one, you don't want metal on metal dry. Two, the trans gel will help act as a suction to get the pump going. So that way it'll get fluid coming in quick. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll get you set up on the tripod, and we'll get this pump half put together. All right, so for the alignment tool, basically you got these two like bushings. They're just for different size stator bushings here. And then you got these two little roll pins, and then the clamp that'll go around the outside. So basically we're going to, we got the pump in, a little bit of trans gel on it, and now we'll get our stator plate put on, kind of line it up with these holes, and then we'll go ahead, kind of hold it, flip it over, do this number, then again do the same here. Where are those three holes at? Get it lined up here. All right. Now this is where these two roll pins come in, and this bushing. Basically you got this bushing that's going to go down in here, and you see how it just kind of moved this and centers it up. See, there's just two different sizes. Like this stator shaft is just long or thicker, so we'll use this white bushing. Set this, center that up, and then use these. Put them at 12 and 6 kind of deal. Oops. Put everything lined back up. Come on. Start with this one. Obviously everything's kind of you know what? Let's start. Everything is super tight fit, obviously, because we're trying to align the pump and make sure it's all aligned, because obviously if it's not aligned, once you put the converter and everything together, it's just gonna be a bad day. And that's if you can even get it in the housing, because obviously if this is out of whack, you won't be able to get it into the transmission itself. All right, there we go. Now everything, there's that. And then what we'll do is we'll take this, put it around, so you see how right about here where that 1 inch is where we kind of want to land this, like right under the seal, right about there. And then we want to tighten it down. Again, all this is doing is aligning the two pump halves so they're pretty much perfectly in sync. That's a good idea right here. You just run a screwdriver along this edge. Look at that. Nice speed, low drag now, boys. And then just tighten her up. And just so you guys see, I didn't put in the front seal, the input seal, because of this tool. So now we can flip it over, we can put in our bolts, torque them down, and then the pump is ready to go and done. Obviously we still got to put in our piston seal for our, I believe, overdrive clutches, but we'll get there when we get there. One thing to note is you want to take your piston spring right here, you guys can see, you want to line up, find which ones are the holes that are used for this. All right, so now we know. Now the pump half bolts will go in the other holes. So just kind of take a mental note there. Pretty simple there. Because these bolts are all the same and they're relatively same holes. So now you guys can see when we go to put this on, we won't be in the wrong spot. All right, so these 10mm bolts will get torqued down to 23 foot-pounds. Do it in a star pattern, of course. Now we can go ahead and take out our alignment tools. Start with the clamp. Come on. There we go. Come on. And then now we'll just install our front seal, our piston, and our apply spring or our return spring, and pump will be done. Quick tip about any sort of seals like these, where they have, see how they have like that spring in there and you got to pound them in. Always, I'd like to take a little bit of like trans gel goop, put a little behind there like that, just so that way when you're pounding it in, it's rare, but I've had it happen where you pound it in, that spring pops out, and then now you lost your tension of the seal. So a little bit of trans gel, pack it in there. We'll fix that, no problem. You guys can see I got the overdrive piston and the return spring installed. This little, I don't know what it's called, spacer or shim or bushing, bearing, whatever, installed. And then of course our coast clutch seals are all installed. Again, same thing, the scarf cut, you can see how they still want to come out. I'll apply a little more before it's time for assembly and I stab everything in. Then of course coast clutch bearing. Pump assembly is all done. Now we can move on to the drums. All right, so I'll show you guys how to put in the apply piston on the coast clutch hub, and then it's pretty much the same for all the other drums, with the exception of I believe the forward and the directs. They have two pistons with a spring in the middle, so you just got to keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, this foot bench works great. That other tool that I showed you with the low reverse spring works just as great too. This is just a little easier because you don't have to hold it and everything like that. But if you're only doing 1 or 2 transmissions every once in a while or whatever, and you don't want to spend $400 or $500 on this tool, like I said, that little $30 Amazon tool works just great for what it does. So a little bit of lube on the piston, a little bit of lube in the drum. Again, guys, I mean, of course there's a limit, but you know, for the most part, lube is your friend when assembling transmission. Just kind of walk it in, get it seated in there. Boom, good to go. Now we have our return spring, goes like that. Now we just set up the tool. Again, guys, sorry about the lighting. I know it's kind of dark. Trying my best with the flash and everything, but just is what it is right now. All right. Then just center up the spring Hold it down. Then we can put in our snap ring. Make sure it's seated all the way around, of course. Let off. We're good to go, ready to start stacking clutches. I'll do the same thing for the other planets and then, or the other drums, and then we'll get to stacking clutches. Woo! Look at that, boys. Been a few days. Our new landlord put in our new lights. So now, it's not so depressing in here. Anyways, guys, we're gonna get back to work on the 5R right now. I'm gonna show you guys, we got all of our drums pretty much ready to go. Our coast clutch drum, our forward drum, direct drum. I got all the clutches stacked up with the steels and snap rings and everything. And basically what I think we're gonna do is, the only thing I still gotta do is I got the direct bushing in the freezer to hopefully help it install better. And I actually found out this Cummins front seal installer that we have, you guys have probably seen me use it on like my on the Cummins timing housings. It actually fits pretty well. See if you guys can see, like pretty decent. So hopefully it'll work. It's just like a little bit of help. We'll go out to the press that in. But anyway, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stack up one of these drums. What I'll do is I'll stack the forward drum right now. I'll show you guys how I do it. I do all my measurements and everything, the initial stack up dry. What we'll do is we'll put everything in, stack it up, measure it out, see if we like it, if we gotta adjust anything, whatever we gotta do. Then we'll put the clutches in the ATF. You guys can see I got the reverse planet and the forward planet inside the in the ATF, just getting the bearings in there lubed up. But yeah, so let's go ahead and stack this up, and basically I'll show you this one, and then the rest are obviously rinse and repeat. So like I said, we got our forward clutches, we got our thick reaction plate, and then we got our wavy. So the wavy goes down first, followed by a solid steel, then clutch, steel, come on, clutch, you get the point. And now, since this is a stock rebuild, we're only going back in with 4 clutches. On the performance rebuilds, I believe we add a clutch here with like the Raybes's GPZ or Alto. And to check, all you need is a feeler gauge, and go from there. So I'm going to start with 39 thou. I believe spec is a bit higher. Go to 43. What's up, Zeus? Chill out, buddy. 45. Getting a little tighter. You want to make sure you go all the way around. Make sure none of the clutches are kind of off center. $47. Try 49. Getting there. Go to 51. 51 seems to be the number. Call it 51, 52 thou right there. So let me check our spec in the book, make sure that's in spec, then we can move on. All right, so I checked the book, we're good to go. Spec is between 45 thou and 65 thou, so we're smack dab in the middle pretty much at 52 thou, so I'm happy with that. Last thing we got to do for this drum is right here is where this little spacer that comes in the Superior update kit, this little metal spacer, pretty thin. That goes right here. And then your new bearing, which I don't think I showed, but every time I do a transmission build, I get new bearings. It's very cheap. Sonex makes bearings pretty much for all these engines, or transmissions, I'm sorry. And hang on one second. So then you take a bearing, and that little spacer just sits right between the bearing and the drum, and good to go. Basically what this spacer is going to do is it's going to take up a bit of the end play. So these transmissions have quite a bit of slop, and the issue with that is, number one, your forward apply sealing surface, those O-rings, you're going to have movement in here, and it's going to shift around, and it could actually shift enough, as well as with the directs, which is more common. You see, you really have just this little bit of space for these to seal on the center support here. So imagine if you have a few thou extra clearance, it can actually slip off and allow fluid to bleed past here, and that's a common issue with burning up the directs on this transmission. So quick, simple fix. And now what we'll do is we're gonna put these forward clutches in the HEF, and we'll move on, stack the rest of these drums, clearance them all out, get them all pre-lubed, then we can start stacking all this into the case. All right, so we got all the drums stacked up. One thing I forgot to mention with the coast clutch, you have this diode here. So you can see it spins one way and doesn't spin the other way. So just make sure that that's how it works like that. If it doesn't, gotta replace it. But anyway, drums stacked. Now, the other thing that the Superior kit comes with is these high pressure sealing rings that go on the forward drum here. I'm not going to use them. Reason being is it requires a resizing tool. So basically you would stretch these rings on, and then now they'll be stretched out. So you have this tool that goes over and will size them back to where they need to be. I don't have that tool, and since this is a lower power build, I'm not too worried about that. So I'll buy that tool in the future, but this build we're just going to use the OEM replacement seals. So there's two seals here in your kit that are going to be kind of the same size. One's going to be a scarf cut style, and then one's going to be like an interlocking ring. Come on, focus up. Like this. So the ones with the interlocking rings are what's going to go here. We're going to put those on, and a little bit of the green assembly goo, just like we did here. These scarf cut O-rings, or rings, seals, whatever, they go down in the case. There's two seals here that seal the output shaft to the case and provide the lube to the rear section of the case. So make sure you guys install these. And then the only other thing, this kit too also comes with new fancy direct seals, and those go on the center support right here. So those are going to go there again with some green goop. And then we got our low reverse snap ring, so we can throw this one away. And then last but not least, we got the new snap ring for the intermediate hub, which goes here. So gonna get all that installed, and then the next thing we're gonna start doing is, I got the case on the bench. We're gonna go ahead and take the reverse clutches. We're gonna stack them up, get our clearance. All right, so to measure low reverse clearance, I'm gonna go down in between the diode and the clutch and just kind of measure it out. Again, you want to check this diode. It should only go one way and stop the other. So my gauges that I have here, I can really go to 74 thous, which what I stacked up here. A little more clearance there, so I'm gonna guesstimate right around 80 thou, which Spec for this clutch is 70 to 120 thou per the manual, so we're good to go. Move on to the next. So I started to assemble some of the like sub assemblies, kind of like this ring gear and gear set. We got our bearings in. Just make sure you get them in the right orientation. Again, guys, follow along with the ATS-G book on this. I've referenced it a few times, this build. What I like to do too is get some green assembly goo, and I put it on all the bushings, anywhere where there's just going to be metal on metal riding in the initial fire up kind of deal. Also, I haven't ever seen this, but this is like your low reverse ring gear. This is the first thing you're going to put in the case. It goes down there. I guess on the early models they had this plate and it had holes in it. If you have that one, you want to replace it with a solid one. It's just much stronger. But again, we got all our bearings in, everything lubed up as far as our rings. All these plastic washers or seals, again, I put some green assembly goo on. And yeah, now we're just got the clutches soaking and we're going to start assembling. And guys, don't forget, like I know I have before, those sealing rings, those scarf cut rings that go down in the case that are for the lube circuit. So we'll start stacking some stuff up. First thing to go in, it's gonna be this gear. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's a bearing down in here. Make sure that bearing's good to go. Make sure it's there. Now we'll start stacking up the transmission. Again, just make sure you got all your plastic rings. Your lower reverse hub has 2 of these spacers. You can see I was soaking this in ATF for a little while just to help it out a little bit. Cool. Now we'll the clutches are drying. We'll start stacking everything up. Last thing I got to do is I got to get this direct bushing in, but I'll get that in and then we'll just I'll put you on a time lapse of just throwing everything in. All right, guys, don't be like me and mess up and put this bushing in wrong. It's a one-way bushing, so you can see this bushing, kind of see in this picture, there's a closed off end and there's an open end. So if you look at the bushing, you can see where this oiling groove goes all the way through, and then on the other side it stops. This only goes in one way, and it's with the oiling groove down. So it needs to go in like this, so it stops at the top. Save yourself $98 because you have to buy the whole Superior kit all over again. And if it weren't for this bushing being such a crucial piece to the transmission build itself and it living, I wouldn't have bought it again. But I think this is probably one of the most important pieces of this update kit. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this new bushing in. Pretty simple. You just want to line up this hole to this hole. Again, you want to make sure the closed end of this oiling hole is at the top, and then you want to make sure you have enough recession, I guess you can say, in spec. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and then we can get the rest of the transmission assembled. All right, so now we need to assemble our forward direct and sun shell. This goes all in as one big piece. So easiest way I've found to do it, you got your direct drum, your forward drum. Want to make sure your seals are all good, your bearings good, your little plastic washers good, and then kind of wiggle it in like that. Gets all the clutches aligned with the splines. And then you got your gear assembly. Again, you got your bearing in here with the spacer. You got your plastic washer lubed up. And then you got a bearing in here. Then you take your sun shell. And there she goes. And you can see how the teeth of the sun shell just kind of go and engage the these splines on the direct drum. That's how you know it's all the way in. Now we'll take this whole assembly and quite literally plop it in here. All right, now in all fairness, there's an actual tool that holds this whole assembly. It kind of locks in here. I don't have that tool and I don't plan to buy it. So I'm just gonna plop her in. Kind of how I do it. Make sure the bearing down in there is good to go. Get her as far in as I can. And just drop her in. Twist it in, lock it in, good to go. Next, you got your intermediate clutches. So start off with your reaction plate and your 3 intermediate clutches. Followed by the center support. Now you just gotta make sure this opening here is indexed with the hole in the case, because that's where the speed sensor comes through. This snap ring here is tapered. Let's see if you can see. You want to make sure that the flat end goes down towards the center support. Next up, we got our coast hub assembly and your intermediate shaft gear set assembly. What you want to be careful of is this bearing here. See how it kind of is offset and you can't take it out. What I like to do is I stand it up right like this, make sure the bearing's seated, and then put this drum on in the vertical like this. Make sure that bearing stays in. And then take this whole assembly, put it in the unit. Now we take our overdrive snap ring and install it in the case. Then we'll take our overdrive reaction plate. Now on this plate there's these 2 marks here and not on the other side. Not quite sure what that means, but I'm gonna go ahead and just put the X up. Then of course our clutches. And then last but not least, we're going to install our pump assembly. Of course, we got a nice fancy new gasket. Make sure it's installed correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good time. Everything's cleaned up, ready to go. We got some lube on our outer seal here. Make sure your O-rings here are secure. And then you got your bearing here. I'm good to plop her in. Then of course we're going to send the bolts home with the impact so they don't go anymore. Just kidding, of course. We're going to torque them down to 20 foot-pounds. All right, so we got the unit flipped over. Next thing we need to install are these 2 feed bolts that go to the center section here. You have 2 different ones. You have one with a bigger orifice and then one with a smaller orifice. So you can see it's kind of restricted, and it's a Torx bit. This one is going to go to the rearmost port on the housing. That's for your forward clutch apply. And then the bigger one with the bigger orifice, the hex head, goes in the front, and that's for your intermediate clutch. These get torqued down to 24 foot-pounds, and then we can go ahead and get our valve body installed. Before we install this valve body though, I want to go ahead and clean it up. This is actually a new Sonex reman valve body, already with their updated manual valve and new solenoids, everything like that. This is actually out of Gabriel's transmission in his Excursion. We used this valve body that was in this transmission to test in his truck, see if it changed anything, and then we just never swapped it back. So anyway, generally I would say just get new solenoids or get a new valve body like this. Definitely get a new OEM harness every time. But since this is basically new, we're just gonna tear it apart and clean it up and kind of show you that process. Super easy. You'll notice the thing about this valve body is, besides the manual shift valve, there's no other sort of like hydraulic valves. It's all solenoid controlled, all electronically controlled. So kind of cool in a way, but also kind of a pain in the butt in a way. So very susceptible to any sort of electrical gremlin or electrical issues. So definitely want to keep that in mind when working with these. So one thing you do want to keep in mind when you're tearing these apart is that these solenoids are all different. They all go in a certain spot, they all work in a certain way, so you cannot mix and match these up. Tear it apart, and what I'm going to do is kind of tear it apart and put the solenoids in the same orientation that they came out. All we're going to do is just open it up, clean it up, put it back together, fresh gaskets, nothing crazy. We got fresh O-rings for the we have fresh O-rings for the connector that goes through the case and connects to the body harness, and then we can slap this in the transmission and rock and roll. All right, so in the interest of time, I just tore it down. As you guys can see, like I said, just kind of keep everything organized. It's exactly how it comes out. All the solenoids here. We got the channel plates. Like I said, there's no extra valves in here or nothing. It's just all solenoids. You have a like bonded gasket, then this plate here with a gasket. So what we're gonna do is just throw this in the parts washer, get it all cleaned up. I'm just gonna brake clean all these solenoids. Now there is a way to test these if you are trying to reuse old ones. You can ohm these out or something like that. It's in the manual. But again, we're not gonna do that today because these are good. One thing is this one here, you can see that it's got like a white connector. This is actually an aftermarket higher pressure solenoid, and I don't think we're going to use this. I think I'm going to grab a stock one out of one of my other valve body cores, just because of the nature of this transmission. Seems very hit or miss. Some people swear by these, some people say don't use them. We were trying it in this valve body that doesn't come with the Sonex valve body, but we were trying it in here to see if it could fix some of the issues we were having on Gabe's transmission, but it didn't. So like I said, I think just because this is a stock build, more or less, I'm not going to use this. So just keep in mind, I don't have an opinion one way or another. I don't have enough experience to tell you, but that's just what we're going to do with this unit. So I'm going to get all this washed up, and then in the meantime, we can tighten up this tail section, get the rear seal installed, and torque down the output shaft nut. All right, now for this output shaft nut, whatever you want to call it, one thing I do is I'm going to go ahead and clean this surface up with some Scotch-Brite. You can see I already did it. We got the seal installed. Now keep in mind there is an O-ring in here, so got it all pulled out. In your rebuild kit, you're gonna have several O-rings, and you're gonna have two that are similar size and one that's a little bit bigger. They're all gonna be kind of the same size, but there's two that are exactly the same size, and those are actually for your valve body harness. And then you got this one. So we're gonna go ahead and slam that in. See if I can do this with one hand. Come on. Make sure it's fully seated. A little bit of trans gel, never hurt no one. You don't want to put your seal in dry. You never want to stick it in dry. Always make sure it's lubed up. Then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on here. You don't have to, it doesn't say that in the manual, but why not? And then this is one specialty tool you're gonna have to have. as you guys can see too, we had to modify it. The original tool just kind of wallered out, so we welded another impact socket on here, and I got my adapter in there. So it's a fancy tool that you got to do. Oh, that was weird looking at the camera and doing that. Fancy tool. Put that down in there, thread it on, and torque to 148 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna have to get Trevor in here to hold the case for me, torque it down, and then we'll move back onto the valve body. One thing I want to mention, that if it's a two-wheel drive unit, you're not gonna have that nut. You're just gonna have a output tail shaft, a little taller, and a longer shaft. So you don't have to worry about that part, but this is a four-wheel drive, so we gotta put this nut on. Needed a little bit of help, had to bear hug the damn thing to get it torqued, but we got it done. One thing I forgot to mention, put the unit in park, otherwise you'll just be spinning. But yeah, so torque down to 148 foot-pounds. That's good to go. Last thing we got to do is get this valve body put together, buttoned up, get her installed, and get our filter put in, and then that's a wrap. All right, so you see I got everything torqued down. I used a paint marker just to mark where I just torqued and to make sure, you know, I didn't miss anything, especially because you're doing a cross pattern. You want to try to do a cross pattern considering it's aluminum. We got an OEM transmission filter installed. Where's the part number at? Part number here. Now, if this is a performance unit, one thing you can do is upgrade. This is the 6.0 style filter. You can upgrade to the 6.4 style filter. You're gonna have to change out the pan to a 6.4 pan, and that is whether you're using like a Mag High-Tech year-end aftermarket pan or a stock pan. The filters will not work. So if you're gonna do that, I recommend it on a performance unit, but just keep in mind you do have to swap out pans. We're not doing that. We're keeping just a 6.0 filter. I decided to keep the aftermarket pressure solenoid just because we're not doing any tuning or nothing like that. So I think it'll help it live a better life. I don't know, we'll find out. Now, the last thing we got to do is install our pan and our gasket. I just want to make a note. This is the gasket I prefer to use every time. It's a bonded gasket, like a rubber, hard rubber with around metal. Cork gaskets are crap. I've never had good luck with them. Any transmission. So if you guys can, 68 Allison, whatever transmission you're working on, get this gasket and you'll have 10 times better luck with it not leaking. So we're just using the stock pan, so we're just going to torque it down to 11 foot-pounds with some blue Loctite on all the bolts, and then that'll be a wrap. And just like that, boys, she's done. So if you guys have made it this far in the video, huge thank you. I know this is a bear of a video, over an hour long, but we covered a lot. Hope you guys learned something. Hopefully this helps you guys if you're going to do a 5R110 rebuild. This is, again, my second 5R that I've built, and I've rebuilt the one a few times, but hopefully we got a little bit better luck on this one than we did the first one. But mainly, guys, I hope this helped you at least understand what it looks like in here and what you got to do to rebuild it. Wasn't many 5R110 videos on YouTube when I looked, and again, I may be wrong. There are a couple, don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to make one that was fully in-depth to kind of show you guys what it takes. As we progress and we do more of them, I'll do more, maybe like the performance rebuild, things like that. But anyway, guys, hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any questions, comments, and concerns, again, leave them in the comments down below. I'll try to get back to you. Huge thank you to you guys for watching, supporting the channel, everything like that. And hopefully you guys are interested in the 6.0 project. In the next video, we're going to get this thing running and hopefully on the road. And then we get into some of the fun stuff of cleaning it up and getting it looking really nice. So really looking forward to that, guys. So if you guys are interested in that project, I have a playlist on the channel of the 6.0 build. We already rebuilt the engine. We just got to get everything together. So again, guys, thank you for watching. See you next time.